When I teach a class, I want my students to learn some useful knowledge. So I care about student learning. Now, unfortunately, many students primarily care about the grade. And so I use my grading structures to try and help assure that the students are actually learning, and I use the grade as motivation to assure that they learn. Now, before I go off and I assign any general grading structure, I set up the goals for the class. Now, there are a lot of different goals you can have in different classes, but I use several different ones. And for something like an Introduction to Industrial Engineering class, my goal is retention. Here, I want to have students stay in the program. I want them to be excited and have enough knowledge and motivation to survive through calculus and physics and all the other rigors of an industrial engineering curriculum. Now, in a junior or senior level class, now I'm trying to build the confidence that they can go out in the workforce and be very productive. I also want to encourage them to continue learning and striving for excellence, so I'm always trying to encourage this continuing education, going on for a master's or a PhD or something like that. And by the time I get to a grad class, I do almost the exact same thing as my junior-senior with building confidence and maybe a little higher level of confidence. But I also want to encourage and provide the ability that if they run across a problem, that they should be able to go off and do research and solve the problem, even if they have to develop the techniques on their own. So once I've established my goals, then I start looking at, well, how am I going to set up my grading structure to encourage students to achieve the goals that I have for the class? And so there's a lot of different mechanisms people use to try and assign grades. Things like attendance, participation, homework, quizzes, projects, reports, exams, student grading. And so I think about which of these will help achieve the goals that I want, and then I'll pick and choose from that to set up my grading structure. So for instance, in my Introduction to Industrial Engineering class, its goal is retention. So I want a lot of group participation. I care about being in class. That's a problem a lot of freshmen have as they go out on their own. And so I put 10% on attendance. They can't get an A without being there at every class. Okay. I put a bunch of group projects. This allows them to have friends. It kind of divvies up the work. They meet a bunch of people, things like that. I do have to give some value to what they've done individually. I don't want to have to grade everything off groups, so I get a final exam and individual assignments throughout the semester, and that provides my grading structure for that, and I think it creates a reasonable atmosphere to try and encourage retention. Now, on a junior level class in my department, I'm looking to try and build the competencies of the people. I want them to be able to go out. I want them to be able to use their knowledge within the field. Now, this operations research class has a ton of math and algorithms. So I need them to get used to the algorithms and the procedures and the math behind it. So I think homework is very critical. I need to have them be able to do the homework because that's going to provide the expertise for them to be able to do well on the exams. Thus, I've got a 10% score on the homework. Okay? I do care that they're able to look at it in terms of a real world. That's what I use the projects for. They're a little longer projects. They're longer word problems. They have to go out and do some stuff. It takes 2 or 3 weeks. It gets back into the real world type of a scenario. Okay? I do care about the exams. So we got 2 midterms. It kind of breaks up the class so they don't have too much material at the end. I do care about the final. I'll make it cumulative. And with that, I do provide an alternate version. I'm okay as long as the students have the mastery before the class ends. So I will give them 2 different options. One where they don't count their midterms at all. They get used to my test-taking strategy, and then they can just count their final for all the midterms. And the idea here is that they have to do the homework in order to get an A, and then that can help build their general confidence as they go through. I teach a lot of different graduate level classes. Some classes follow almost exactly like that junior level operations research class, where build your confidence through a bunch of homeworks. Usually those homework problems have some harder theoretical concepts because of the graduate level. Then do a little bit of projects to make sure you can apply it in the real world, and finally the 70% on exams. Now other classes, like my simulation class, it's almost all computer programming, developing very complex models, and then coming through and doing statistical analysis on it. So for something like that, because of the goals, it's almost all projects. Those are very hard to successfully evaluate in a short time, and they should have a sufficient amount of time to be able to develop all the analysis and reports that go along with that. Whenever I try and solve a problem, I first look to try and avoid a lot of really bad outcomes. Once I get rid of all the bad stuff, then I can try and work on finding better solutions. So I did the exact same thing with my grading structures. There are 2 outcomes that I find are really annoying to me. One is cheating. I don't think there's very much that is worse than cheating. It takes a ton of time in the faculty, a ton of time in the student. In some sense, you just accuse them of something, and you may actually get sued for libel. So I try and do things to avoid cheating. The other one is I really hate the whining. And so things I do to help avoid cheating is that I got to make sure it's worthwhile. There's a reason that on homeworks I let them get help from anyone. It's a 10% maximum over all these homework assignments. I don't want to ever have to accuse somebody of cheating on something like that. So cheating can only occur in certain situations in my class. Okay? Next, I want to try and let people understand what plagiarism is. If I'm writing papers, I will say, I put this paper through this software. It will look for this sequence of words across the entire internet. I want to let them know because I don't want them to cheat because that's going to take so much more time. I find a quick 2-minute discussion during the syllabus of saying, is this plagiarism? Raise your hand if you think this is plagiarism. Is this plagiarism? And I'll go through like 5 common things that I've seen, and we'll vote as to whether they are or not, and then I'll clarify which ones are plagiarism, which ones weren't. Where do you put the quotes? Where do you cite? Things like this. And all of a sudden they know what my expectations are. So fundamentally, if cheating happens and I have to accuse somebody, I want to make sure I win. So I've got to make sure that everything is well spelled out on the syllabus regarding cheating, what my expectations are on every single assignment, because there's nothing worse going through that whole experience and finding out that the student was right and they didn't cheat. So going along the same lines, as you look at projects, I try and devise projects that are kind of hard, and frequently they're vague and goal-oriented. You can watch the video on that. And so a lot of students go off and they answer different questions. And they're off, one's working on this, one's working on this, like, what'd you get? I got this, I got this. And even if they're talking back and forth, they can't really help each other, and so it just diminishes the whole idea of cheating because of that. The last thing that I don't like is the whining. Students come in and say, oh, I need an extra 3 points on this exam. Don't I get an extra 2 points on this? So what I try and do is I try and provide alternate grading schemes. This is why I have the second version on my OR class, where I'm like, it's on the final. You can go 70% on the final, or 20% on the 2 midterms, 30% on the final. They do bad on the final. Well, I studied really hard, but I made all these careless errors. I'm like, well, now you get a chance to do it on the final, and this grade can count as 0. And now they're less likely to argue with me and haggle over a few little points here and there, and it becomes a much better thing where I can try and inspire them to learn more and do better on the final, because all their grade is now dependent upon the final. And so those kind of things help. I actually saw one faculty member who teaches a broad-based class, like 300 students, and he says, I give them 3 different options. One of the options is don't do any homework. You don't want to spend time learning this, that's fine. We'll do it all on exams, and then it becomes the student's responsibility as to which one they want, and if they don't do very well, that's their own fault, and that's what they chose. So there are various ways to generate grades for students, and here are my general personal views. I will only use attendance and participation in a class that focuses on retention. All other classes, I care that you just gain the mastery of the material. Homework, it is almost required in almost every single class. I want them to use that to develop their general expertise. Quizzes, I find this takes too much of my time. I've got to grade all these quizzes. My students got to grade these quizzes. I got to take time out of class to offer these quizzes, and so to me, the time spent doesn't seem worth the value of it, so I won't do quizzes. Projects, I like projects. Almost all of my classes have projects. I want them to have a little deeper understanding and spend a little more time on that. I do really care about reports and papers, particularly industrial engineering. If I can save you $1 million and I can't convince you I'm right, then clearly I've made a mistake. So I do care that people learn how to write reasonable reports and become a little more persuasive in their writing. I use exams in almost all of my classes. I think it's an easy way to check. It doesn't take that much class time. I'd really never use student grading. Not unless it's in the retention class and I'm doing a bunch of group projects and I want to make sure that everybody actually participated, but I fundamentally don't believe in student grading. I'm the one who's supposed to be the expert. I'm supposed to be the one that's going to give them and assign them the grade. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this discussion on grading structures. I hope you set up grading structures that will enhance your students' learning so that you get the learning you want and they get the grades you want. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel.